You know, for all its flashy heroes and movie villains, Marvel Superheroes is actually a very back-to-basics limited format. Play to the board, pack removal, focus on creatures, so on and so forth. It's pretty simple for a set released in the 2020s. But just because it's basic does not mean that the gameplay is a cakewalk. So let's do each other a favor. You subscribe to the channel, and I will make sure that you avoid all of the early pitfalls of Marvel Superheroes Limited. If you find yourself losing a lot in this format, it's probably because you're just not playing to the board enough. This is what the folks over at Limited Resources would call a C.A.B.S format, which stands for cards that affect the board. Pretty much every archetype in the set is focused on creatures. Whether that's green-white heroes, black-red villains, or the black-white exalted. Even the trickier decks like blue-black connive and blue-reds ultimately win the game with creatures. That means that everything that you do needs to be affecting the board in some way or another. Play creatures, removal spells, combat tricks, all that good stuff. You have a few slots for pure card advantage spells, but ultimately you need to get on board quick and make sure you don't fall behind. For whatever reason, this set is full of air elementals. Seriously though, look at Thor Odinson, Captain Marvel, Wonder Man. Why are there so many air elementals in this set? My point is that there's no shortage of expensive creatures that you can jam into your deck. And I'm not even trying to tell you that you shouldn't play at least some of them, but you should definitely avoid playing more than just a couple, and you don't need to pick them highly in the draft either. The removal matches up very well against all the creatures I just listed. They have high upside, but it's a huge blowout to cast one of these on turn 5 and to have it get taken out by a Murdoch's Crusade or Cruel Alliance or whatever else. Plus, this set naturally has enough mana sinks already without forcing you to play expensive creatures. Your power-up cards are your late-game threats, and they make sure you don't fall behind on board early on. Plus, the landcyclers are actually pretty good for once and serve as great middle or top-end cards that have value early on as well. There are some expensive cards that you're going to want to run in your decks, just don't use all of them. The next trap is kind of true of Magic in general, but it's particularly applicable here for Marvel Superheroes Limited. Don't get too cute with your removal spells. Yes, the optimal time to cast an instant speed removal spell is usually during the opponent's turn, but there are quite a few reasons you just want to fire off removal during your turn when the opponent's tapped out. First things first, there are a ton of combat tricks in this set. Cards like Take Up the Shield, Stolen Stark Tech, Night Nurse, and Super Suit really mess you up if you run into them. We also have teamwork to contend with here. Your opponent has to have creatures in play to use teamwork abilities, so letting them untap with something and get a potential extra benefit is a disaster, especially if you had a chance to remove their creature before they untapped. Once they've paid the teamwork cost on a spell, it's too late to interact with that creature to prevent the bonus effect. Plus, there are a few cards like Visions of Villainy that benefit from having a certain type of creature in play. The rule of thumb here is that if you know you're going to remove a creature and you have the means to do it, it's probably best to do it right away instead of waiting to let your opponent untap. Marvel Superheroes is the first 10 archetype set we've had in quite some time. To the new folks out there, this is what most limited formats look like, with 10 supported color pairs and an intended theme for each one. If you started playing Magic this year, you might not know that, since every other set released this year has been a 5 archetype set. It is nice to get back to a fully fleshed out set like this one, but I do want to caution against going too deep on the archetypes WotC's laid out for us here. If you've watched our limited guide, which you totally should if you haven't, we had some great intuitions about the set there, you'll know what the 10 intended archetypes that WotC has laid out for us here. However, Marvel Superheroes doesn't really play by the book, and it's easy to get baited by some of the taglines they put on these color pairs. Some work as intended, like the Heroes and Villains decks in green-white and black-red respectively. But some of them are way looser in practice than you might expect. For example, let's take a look at black-white. WotC's official description calls this an attack alone deck, where you send one creature into combat at a time and pump it up. And there are definitely cards that support the theme, like Luke Cage and the uncommon Black Widow. But you can also just play black-white as a deck full of good cards and ignore that theme altogether. I've personally liked drafting a half-white, half-black villains and heroes deck that goes for an attrition game with cards like Decoy Plot. But just because you're in black-white doesn't mean you have to go all in on attack-alone cards like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra Infiltration. Same goes for blue-white, which feels like one of the standout decks of the format so far. It's described as blue-white teamwork, where you're tapping and untapping all your stuff for value, but that's just not how it plays. Sure, you're gonna have some teamwork cards, but blue-white is better played as a straight tempo deck with interaction and flyers. Don't get caught up on the WotC description here and feel like you have to be in a certain lane just because you're drafting a particular color pair. I want to shout out blue-green here too, which is supposed to be a 1/1 counter deck but works just fine as a ramp deck with a few top-end threats and splash cards to go over the top. This dovetails into our next point, which I literally actually think is a trap, or at least it seemed like that early on. For whatever reason, there are a couple mini-themes seeded into this set that are just totally undercooked. In particular, that's black-white equipment and green life gain. These are not fully supported archetypes, but there are cards across all rarities that seem to signal a deck for each one. The black-based equipment deck is the more realistic of the two. You have Whiplash, Ronin, and Swordsman at uncommon, plus Winter Soldier at rare, and these cards read like sweet payoffs for an equipment deck. And you can kind of make this work with Stolen Stark Tech and John Walker, plus maybe another piece of equipment or two, but you really shouldn't be chasing after this deck. There's basically no incentive to build this deck at common, and cards like Swordsman and Ronin don't really do anything without the equipment to back them up. Sometimes you'll see these cards really late in the first pack, and your draft's not going too well, so you can mess around and see if it comes together. Or maybe you open Winter Soldier and you've got a real reason to try it, but for the most part, this is something like a 1 in 20 draw deck. And if you do end up drafting this deck, let the pieces come to you. All-in payoffs like Ronin should be wheeling if you're supposed to be drafting the deck, so don't spend high picks on the support pieces. The second trap here is green life gain, which is really just 2 cards. Tigra, Feline Fury, and Heroic Feast. Now just to be clear, when I say that these cards are traps, I don't mean that you should never play them. Just don't take them expecting a full life gain deck to come together. Tigra's actually just fine as a 2-drop that might grow with a few other cards in your deck, especially with the dual lands in this set gaining life. Heroic Feast I'm a bit more skeptical of, so I pretty much never end up first picking this card if I'm playing it at all. There are a few stray life gain cards that make these build-arounds work, just don't expect your whole deck to support them if you do end up drafting them. As much as I hate to say it, one of the biggest ways to lose in this format is if you're up against Photon Living Light. We don't get a lot of big, dumb, hexproof creatures in Limited anymore, so I don't know why they decided to put something like this into the set. But if you do want to win more, I suggest you do your best to either stay away from Photon as much as possible or open it yourself. Truly, this is an easy ticket to a trophy deck, folks. And how are you supposed to avoid your opponents having busted rares like Photon? You can't. I'm using Photon as an example here, but this goes for any of the over-the-top unbeatable rares like the Superhero Civil War, Alien Invasion, Captain Marvel, Captain America, Doctor Doom, MODOK, Squirrel Girl. You get it. This is a bomby format. If you ever want more advice from the Daily Upkeep team, check out the Draftsim Discord linked in the description below, where we've got tons of members who are ready to give you advice about your latest draft deck.